Hi class. In this short video, we're going to be reviewing how to take dimensions of components that are in our view. So there's a couple different ways that we can get to the dimension tool. If we look at the top, there is this tool called Align Dimension. We can click that and it'll open up the interface. If you're not seeing it up there, another place we can find the annotation dimension tool is by clicking Annotate. And then on the left, you'll see this dimension tab, which allows us to dimension a few different components. We can either do aligned or linear. In this case, we're going to use the line tool. And you can see as we hover over certain lines, they highlight blue. If we simply click and then align to something else that is parallel to that line, we can simply just click and drag and drop, and it'll create that dimension. Note, if your dimensions are appearing in inches and not inches and feet, which we should be doing for the overall architectural drawings, we can click on this and go to the Properties tab and drop down. This family, this dimension family, is specifically in inches. The one above that, if we click on it, you can see it will switch it over to feet and inches. These are properties that have been specifically designed or made to appear in a certain format. If we click on the Edit Type tool right under the properties line that or dimension style that we are working with, it will open up this interface that has all these different options. If we scroll down a little bit under primary units, you can see the format shows up there. We can change our rounding, and we can also change the way it appears. So I'm going to leave this as is because the intent is for it to be feet and inches. But if there's any reason that you want to modify a dimension down the road, this is how you can get to this to modify and change the appearance of your dimension. Note, if you change anything in that parameter, it will affect all of the dimensions that you are working with. So if I create another dimension here, so I have two separate dimension lines. If I click on one, this one is appearing as linear dimension style, 330 seconds aerial. If I click on this one, it is also linear dimension style, 330 seconds aerial. So if I were to change this family here, and I change it to inches, and I hit OK, and press OK, you can see this also changed. It's important to keep track. It's important to keep track of which dimension styles you are using. If I want to keep them separated, you should either specifically use the one called out as inches, and if you're trying to show in inches and change the graphic display of it somehow, you can change it by doing that way. Another way you can do it is if you want to make a unique situation for this dimension style, is simply by opening up the edit type and hitting duplicate here, and then name it something specific to what you are changing it to. So let's say I'm trying to show this as red. I'm going to change this as red, and then I can change it here, press OK, and I'll press OK. So now you can see it changed it to red. When I click on it, now the way this is appearing, it's reading 3/32 inch aerial, inches red. If I do the drop down, we can see that there is the old one, which just says inches, and if I change it to that, you can see that is maintained the same. When we are going back into modifying dimensions, there's a couple things that we can do to modify a dimension once it's placed. If you click on a dimension line, you can see there are two different bubbles that appear on each side of the line. The bottom one adjusts the length of the leader line. So we can adjust that on both sides. Another way to extend the leader line is by just simply pulling this line by clicking on it and dragging it as such. The second dots allow us to actually change what we're dimensioning to. So if you accidentally dimension to the wrong line, you simply just click on it. You can zoom in and place it or associate it to a new line. As a reminder, a good tooltip for while you're modeling and taking dimensions, to use the thin lines tool, which will allow you to be more precise with your lines and even any annotation that you're working with outside of dimensioning. So if I click this on, you can see everything becomes much more thin and allows me to make sure that we are dimensioning to the correct thing. Another thing that we can do with dimension lines is by clicking on the dimension line, we can edit it, which will allow you to actually expand what we're dimensioning to. Remember, a good practice is to have a continuous single line all the way across, so we're not dimensioning each individual component by this method here. The correct formatting in practice should be to have one singular dimension line as above. So if I were to continue doing this all the way across, good practice is to dimension to openings and architectural features as needed. So we're just going to go quickly across. And then, so now that we have placed all of them, we can see that we have a nice continuous dimension line all the way across. As a reminder, and per your assignment 1 requirements, on the building floor plan, right now we are working more in a site plan view. But for a building floor plan, we want to dimension to all the openings and all the doors and architectural features. The second row, we should be dimensioning to the column lines. As such. And then the outside corner. You want to make sure that these two dimension lines are aligned. That way, these relate to one another, and the general contractor or whoever's reading knows the distance to the face of the wall from this column line. We want to do the same thing here. So and then the last is going to be the overall width of the building. So we're going to go from there to there. And then remember that also dimension lines snap to one another. So you can kind of see how this dimension line snaps into place. So these are all equally spaced apart. It looks nice and neat. We can read it very well. If your dimensions are overlapping, say we have a dimension that is really close, something like that. So we starts to get a little hard to read. What we can do is we can drag and drop that little dot and pull them out as needed to make it more legible. One thing that was brought up in class as well, I'm going to create 2 different walls, and then I'm going to dimension to them. If you're finding that when you try to dimension to like an outside face of wall, see how it's snapping to the middle? One thing we can do in order to correct what it's snapping to, if we can't get it to snap to the correct line, if you press tab, you can cycle through all the different lines that are appearing in your model. So one good tip to know as you're working in Revit, use the tab function to select various items underneath your mouse pointer. Once you have the correct line highlighted, you click, and then you go to the other side, you tab through until you get the correct line, you click again, and we can place it. So you can see we have 2 of the same instances, a 14-foot 1-inch wall. If I were to click on this and hit this lock button, what that is doing is it's locking the distance between these 2 walls. If I were to move this wall, we can see the dimension line changes with the distance of the wall. If I were to move this change, because this dimension line is locked, you can see the entire instance is going to move over because I've locked that dimension, telling Revit to hold these 2 components 14-foot 1-inch apart. And that is the gist of dimensions.